Just a couple of practicalities. If you can have your microphone on mute unless you're invited to speak, so that we don't get big background noises like we've got at the moment. If you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. This is probably the best way, or type your question or comments in the chat. So we'll keep an eye out on the chat and we'll respond. And you can make a comment or ask a question that way. But Jenny and Philippa will invite you to participate and respond to questions throughout the presentation. At the end and over the next day or two, you will be given access to a recording of the webinar and you'll be given a certificate of participation as well. So first of all, I'd like to let Billy do a little introduction about who Aspire Learning Resources are.
Yep. Hi everyone, I'm Billy. I'm probably frozen on some of your screens, so I do apologise for that. I am having some MS Teams issues, but hopefully that doesn't mean you can't hear me. So Aspire Learning Resources, we've been established in 1991, and we are a not-for-profit organisation, and we specialise in the development of competency-based learning and assessment resources for the vet market. We've also worked as vet consultants, and we're also an RTO once upon a time. So we develop resources in a range of areas and training packages, including foundation skills, pre-employment skills, community services, aged care, mental health, disability, home care, health services, business services, children's services, leadership and management, and business administration as well. In 2001, we also established the Aspire Foundation to promote opportunities for disadvantaged people to gain access to vocational training programs so they may acquire job-ready skills. Now, if your organisation has any programs that they're about to run or looking to run, which could possibly, potentially, that we could fund, please email me and I'll forward the details on to my colleagues, and we can look into that for you as well. So, yeah, thank you, Dave.
Oops, I better unmute myself now. Thanks, Billy. A little bit about ACR. ACR is Australian Council for Educational Research, and we're a not-for-profit educational organisation. We've actually been around for over 90 years, so we're actually established back in 1930. So we have a long history. We basically, our aim is to create and promote research-based knowledge, products and services across the whole lifespan of learning. And we aim to not only support learners themselves, but basically target learning professionals, learning institutions, and try and help promote learning across society. We have a pretty big reputation nationally and internationally. We have about 400 employees. As I said, to start with, we're also not-for-profit, so we're independent of government. We get no ongoing money. People often think we're government funded, but we're not. So we're all reliant on generating income through winning contracts and undertaking research. We have offices now located not only in Melbourne, but in Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide, London, Dubai, New Delhi, and Jakarta. And ACR works with schools, education departments, ministries of education, further and higher education institutions. So we try and do a fair bit of work, mainly probably more famous for work in schools and higher education, but we do have a section that works in vocational education, and we offer one of the literacy and numeracy assessment tools called the CSPA. So I'd like to finish the introductions and hand over to my colleagues, Jenny and Philippa, and they'll introduce themselves rather than me reading out a blurb, and hand them over and let Jenny share her screen. So I'll close this down and over to Jenny.
Great. Thanks, Dave. We'll just try and organise this technology for you. This is always the gulp moment where you share your screen and you realise you've got the wrong one. And I hope now that you can see a big red screen in front of you.
Yep, we've got it. Yep.
Great. Okay. So, Philippa, I'll let you start if you like.
So, we were asked by DESE, Department of Education, Skills and Employment, to develop a digital literacy skills framework in a very short time frame that would mirror the Australian Core Skills Framework. Is there background noise there?
Hang on, Philippa, you're muted too now, so can you unmute?
Is that right?
Yep, that's good.
Okay, so it was written specifically for the Foundation Skills for Your Future funding, which began in June last year. So what I want to do first off is just orient you back to the ACSF so that you'll understand how the Digital Literacy Skills Framework has been put together. What we want you to do is put your hand up or put a question in the chat anytime through the presentation, and we'll keep an eye on that. And we're also going to ask you to have a go at rating a few, putting them against their levels, a few of the activities that we've got. So don't be worried about anyone looking at what you've said. What we want is to hopefully, if we've written it well enough, we'll get you into the ballpark. Even if you can't get the exact level, you might say pre-level 1 or level 1, something like that. So just join in so you have a go. Okay, let's go to the next slide, which is an overview of the ACSF. So I'm going to go fairly quickly through this. I guess I'm assuming some knowledge. If you haven't got any knowledge of the ACSF, you should still be able to follow this, but I'm not going to give a detailed introduction to the ACSF. So the ACSF offers these shared concepts and language and a systematic approach to benchmarking, etc., which enables us to be able to have a common language and also do tasks like write assessment tasks, rate performance, rate job roles, that sort of thing. So if you look then at the key applications, a lot of people think the ACSF is just an assessment tool, but it's a lot more than that. It is a framework that can work for you in lots of ways. So I'll just leave you to look at those 5 key applications of the ACSF. Okay, next slide. So the idea we understand is that the digital literacy and the pre-level 1 are going to be incorporated into one ACSF document, but that hasn't occurred yet. Currently, they're in 3 different documents, and they actually say different things. So we've given you an overview of what will happen when these are incorporated. So there will be 6 core skills, and we've got digital literacy in brackets because it's not yet incorporated. There will be 6 levels, and the digital literacy skills framework at the moment goes from pre-level 1 to level 3. We don't know if that will change. It will only change if there's pressure from practitioners and, workplaces, key bodies requesting that. So at the moment, it only goes up to level 3. And then the 3 domains of communication are the same for this document as well. That's personal and community, workplace and employment, and education and training. Next slide, Jenny. Now, this performance variables grid is used for the digital literacy skills framework, and it's absolutely critical to the document. The best one to look at is the one that's in the currently in the digital literacy skills framework or in the pre-level 1, because obviously they've been upgraded since we originally wrote the ACSF. So the support context, text complexity and task complexity is a critical page section of the ACSF and the DLSF. And I think we've got a slide of well, we've just copied it up to level 2.
Level 3.
Sorry, up to level 3. Can I just get a feeling from everyone? Are you all, first off, you've got a copy of the Digital Literacy Skills Framework that was sent to you this morning. Are you all familiar with what we're talking about here with the core skills, the domains, and the performance variables grid? Just pop it in chat if you're, just say yes, fine, keeping up, whatever.
Or thumbs up or hands up.
Or yes, a hands up. Yeah, great. Yeah, we're getting plenty of yeses.
Great.
Okay, that's great. Let's push on. So the copy that has been sent to you is not the one currently on the DESI website. And we're suggesting the use of one that we've sent. What DESI tried to do was add white space to make the version more friendly, but it's actually pushed tables across onto 2 or 3 pages, which doesn't help the work that we've all got to do. So, and this framework is draft at the moment. So we still would like to hear from you about how you think it's working, and we'll talk a little bit more about some suggestions later on. So it's an additional skill rather than an additional framework, but it will be incorporated into the ACSF. We looked at existing frameworks, we distilled recurring themes and content, and we also decided we were actually asked to write a digital skills framework, but as we researched it, which included talking to people like Dave, and we were adamant that we wanted it to be a digital literacy skills framework, which is in line with the ACSF. And you'll see when you look at the indicators, how we're trying to pick up some of that digital literacy, not just digital skills. So we use the ACSF core skill of learning as a guide, and we developed these 2 indicators. So it'll be indicator 0.12, active awareness of self as a digital user, and 13, knowledge use and application of digital literacy skills. So they're the 2 indicators, and on the next slide you'll see
Sorry, Philippa.
That's all right. So we'll have, for this, like the ACSF, we've got the name of the core skill, we have the indicators broken into focus areas, and then the focus areas list the performance features, which show they actually are about quite a level of specificity of what skill we're actually trying to develop in the learner or assess in the learner. So that's about the skill acquisition. And then the sample activities, which is about the application of those skills within one of the 3 domains. So that's the difference between performance features and sample activities. One's about acquiring the skill, one's about applying it. So you might acquire the skill of knowing how to put capital letters or small letters in an online form. The sample activity might be actually to set a strong password. So when would you need that skill, basically? Okay. All right, next. So this is how it looks. Jenny chose navy blue to make it stand out from the others, but it all goes, it's all colour coded in the ACSF, which helps you work through it. Okay, that's clear to anyone? Any questions so far? Okay, next slide. Okay, so these are the indicators that we outlined before, and under the indicators you've got 2 focus areas in each. So the first ones are about active awareness of self as a digital user, and that's about connecting and communicating and collaborating. And it's also about digital identity and safety, which we were adamant had to go into this framework. And then about the use and application of digital literacy skills, there's 2 focus areas: digital technologies and systems, and then access, organise, present and problem solve. It's always hard to get your head around these when you just look at them on paper. But as we work through it and as you use it as a framework, it'll become a lot clearer. Now, please remember it's in draft form. So if you've got any suggestions, please let us know what they are. All right, so now you've got the name of the core skill, the indicators and the focus areas. So then we have the list of the indicators at each level. Same pattern as in the ACSF. I'll let you just have a look through those and you can see how they become more complex as you go up.
So I'm just going to jump in here, Philippa, and just point out some of the common language that happens with the other core skills. And so at pre-level 1, you've got extremely limited awareness, extremely limited knowledge. And so that word extremely is linked to pre-level 1. So we're trying to follow that same pattern for each of the levels here in digital literacy. So at level 1, highly familiar contexts. At level 2, familiar contexts. And at level 3, familiar and a range of familiar and some unfamiliar contexts. So we're just making those connections with the other skills as we move through the levels. And then the next slide is just lists some sample performance features for you. So begins to navigate extremely simple digital screen, which is a performance feature out of the 13 indicator. And we set this up, we were going to get you to do an activity and try and give that performance feature a level, but we thought that might take too much time. So we've just presented this slide here with some sample performance features and noted which indicator they're from, whether they're from the 12 or the 13 indicator. And then we've just identified the level here on the slide just to give you a bit of an example of how it works. I think somebody might have their themselves unmuted. We're just getting a little bit of background noise there. So just if you can just check that you're on mute. So second one, ensure security software is downloaded and updated. So we're saying that's a performance feature at level 2. Uses the internet to connect with others using a limited range of digital devices and software. So you can start to do that at level 1 and so on. So just trying to introduce you to some of the language here. And then this next slide, we've just listed 4 different sample activities. And we're wondering if you can have a stab at identifying which level those sample activities are from. So in the chat, you might just list off 4 numbers or the 4 different levels that you think those sample activities are from. And remember, this is where we get to actually applying the skill of digital literacy. So turns computer off and on again as a troubleshooting strategy. So just a bit more than actually turning it off and on. It's identifying that you can actually do that as a troubleshooting strategy. So I might just give you a minute there to have a bit of a think about that, and maybe pop some numbers in the chat to see if you can identify the levels of those sample activities. To say, Philippa, we did this with another group, didn't we? And we were pleasantly surprised at how many people were bang on with their levels.
Yes, that was good. Jenny,
Yeah.
Should that be built in, number 2?
Oh, sorry, it should be built in, yes.
It's all right. This is about, it's not about writing, so this is about digital literacy. So
You're allowed to make spellings.
It's an edit for us.
It is an edit for us, yes. So we've got some numbers coming through. I can't see all the chat. I can only see one at a time, but I did notice somebody was absolutely, well, in agreement with us. Yeah. And I can see there are some people who have got it bang on, which is fantastic. So I'll just give just a few seconds more for a few more to come through.
I think the most variety, Jenny and Philippa, is in the first one actually.
Yeah.
Varies from 1 to 4, I think, but the others are usually within about 1 of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next slide, we've put in how we've got those activities currently rated in the document. So they are examples of sample activities at level 1, level 3, pre-level 1A and level 2. And so, I think
might be worth talking about the first one, Jenny, if we're getting a range in that, just the difference between turning it off and on again, which we would say would be a pre-level 1, is just turning your computer on or off. But actually knowing that as a troubleshooting strategy is a sort of a level higher. So somebody says to you, well, what will you do if you've got a problem with your computer? And that's sort of a very obvious one. So it's still low level. Can we get comments from people who thought that was level 2 or 3? Can they talk if they want to, Dave?
Yep, sure. If they put their hand up, and you just need to see whose hand appears, and then you can invite them to talk. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's a feedback that's really important.
So somebody just made a comment. Matt, do you want to? You just actually said 3 because it was about a strategy. Do you want to? Comment. Yep.
I just thought that the term strategy sort of fell into the category 3. I didn't see it anywhere else, that's all. But I might have been mistaken, that's all.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's sort of intended as a troubleshooting action, and I guess the learner might not necessarily understand that as a term, but it's about sort of doing something when the computer doesn't work. And so what would you do? Turn it off and on. I think that's sort of the pathway we were thinking along.
Is it, Matt, is it the word strategy that threw you?
Strategy and probably troubleshooting, the combination.
Possible action or something like that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, a few people, Philippa and Jenny, have commented it's the use of the troubleshoot along with the strategy that sort of implies this more sophisticated, action that they're taking. So
yeah, that's a good point. We might need to simplify that a little bit. Yeah. Great. Thank you. That's good. Okay. Now, we thought what we might do is, Philippa and I have been part of a team, and we've actually been writing some digital literacy assessment tasks for ACR. And we just thought we might show you a couple of examples of those tasks, more as a way of showing you that you know, when you're trying to assess digital literacy, there's usually at least one other skill that you're trying to, that is incorporated in doing these tasks. So the one that I've got on the screen at the moment, obviously it's about understanding the size of digital files. And it's something that you need to know, for example, to be able to send a photo by email. So the task is just getting people to order the size of the files, but obviously it's a very numeracy related task. And so we thought about that, you know, is it digital literacy or is it numeracy? And we sort of said, well, you know, in the end it's both. And that's really how skills in the ACSF work. They're often very connected to other skills. So often very hard to isolate from each other.
Well, not be able to do it.
Yeah, well, we thought maybe what we might ask people to do is have a stab at what level of task you might think that is. So again, you might want to just pop that in the chat. What level do you think it's? Level 1, level 2, level 3? You might want to have a go. Yep, someone, I can see 2 in the chat.
Yep, everyone's in the ballpark.
Lots of people sitting on the fence saying 2 or 3. Yep.
Yeah.
Which is what we always argue with ACSF, is that, you know, the distinctions really between 2 and 3 can be pretty fuzzy. So
yeah, and it's a continuum. So
yeah. And so when we wrote this task, we did have it tagged as level 3, but we're, you know, all these tasks will be trialed. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of that trial is, to see if it really does bed down a level 3 task. So that's great. Thank you. And the next one, similar again, but, you know, the common purpose for the control key. You really can't do this task without some reading as well. So, you know, inextricably linked to reading. So again, you might just want to have a look at that task and have a stab at what level you think that one is.
And Philippa and Jenny, while people are thinking and looking at that, you're about halfway through, so that's about 45 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
Do you mean 30 minutes, Dave?
Oh, can I not do my arithmetic? There you go. There's a numeracy task. I'm looking at the lengths. I'm looking at the timer, which says when we started, and of course we logged in early. So there you go. There's a. I failed numeracy level 3, I think. So
now this is going to be a really good discussion, Jenny. Can you see all the chat?
Well, I can just see them coming through one at a time.
Yeah.
I can see lots of level 2 and 3, but I think.
Yep, that's the pattern. And we've rated it as a high 1.
That's right.
Now, is it because that, I don't know, is it because there's a lot of reading? So the reading demand is higher than the digital literacy skill demand? Can we get some feedback? It's the language, okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else got comments about why you rated it at 2 or 3?
I think you have to have some underpinning knowledge to know what the control key does.
Yep.
You certainly have to have some vocational language, don't you?
Level 1 doesn't usually use capitals, but I think we have got it at pre-level 1, haven't we? knowing that
Yeah, definitely.
PL1B?
PL1B, you can use some capitals with some inaccuracy, I think.
So this is really good feedback for us, because it's a validity issue too, that you're relying. If you're doing one-on-one interviews, it's not so bad because you can read it to the learner. But it's very hard to do the digital literacy assessment without calling on some learning, reading and numeracy skills in particular. So we'll have a look at all this feedback.
Philippa, Christy's got a hand up to presumably ask a question.
Terrific. Go, Christy.
Yeah, hi Philippa, hi everyone.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm just wondering if the question was flipped on its head. It could be more suitable for level 1, because I do agree that you start using the control key quite early. It comes up a lot, but rather than listing a whole heap of purposes, maybe if you flipped the question and said, if you wanted to do this, would you use the shift, the control, or the space bar, something like that.
Okay. Yes.
Just a suggestion.
Terrific. Thanks, Christy. Is that Christy from Tasmania, from Hobart?
No, Christy from Kingscliff, quite the opposite weather-wise.
Oh, up the other end. Thank you. All right, do you want me to keep going, Jenny?
Yeah, I think we should move on, but thanks everybody. That's been really good. Great feedback.
So we wanted just to talk to you about some feedback that we've received and see what you think. I'm just writing down in the focus. Yeah. Because this is still in draft, it enables, it's really good that DESI allowed us to do this, because we can sit here and write it, but it's not until you people actually pick it up and use it that we know if it's working or not, and where it isn't working. So your feedback is critical to that. One of the pieces of feedback that we've received is that we should allow a focus area or an indicator that says, ask the user to explain what they're doing and why they're doing it. So this is a bit like the third indicator in numeracy. Is everyone familiar with that? And I think numeracy and digital literacy are a little bit different to the other skills. And I think it's a legitimate concern that we perhaps should have added that in. And we'd like to get some feedback from you. Do you think we should have something like that as an extra focus area or as a performance feature? And do you think it, if it looked like the third numeracy indicator, that would be a good idea? So just put it in the chat because we'll get a copy of all of this.
So what we're talking about, Philippa, is about being able to communicate either verbally or in writing about the skill of digital literacy. So this is about, the conversation that you have with the help desk person, for example, or being able to explain how to navigate a digital screen.
Or understand,
Or understand. And so Philippa and I have been talking about this since the feedback came in, and I think it's a good idea, but I also think maybe that skill needs to be included in oral communication, because being able to talk about your technical skills is could be across the board, not just about digital literacy, but maybe it's also similar to the plumber being able to talk about, putting the O-ring on the bit of pipe, whatever they're doing. But it's about being able to embrace the vocational language that of the field that you're working in, to be able to explain what you're doing. So that's just another sort of stream of thought.
Except that we might never get the opportunity to do that, whereas we probably will get the opportunity. But maybe it could go in both. That wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah, true.
Okay, we've got all those comments coming through. Thank you for that. Look,
I can't see the comments, Philippa, but it looks like there's a lot of agreement there to say that people think it's a good idea.
I think it'd be a good addition. Yeah. Yeah. Or another area, and I don't know if you're familiar enough with the framework yet to be able to answer this, but there was feedback that drifted back to me. I didn't hear it directly, but that in the higher levels, 2 and 3, our framework started to look more like digital skills rather than digital literacy. I think that's what they were saying, and that there just wasn't, the sample activities weren't picking up enough variety, particularly I think in the workplace one. And I would say I would have some sympathy with that, because we did write it fairly quickly. And I don't know if, did anyone read the article in Good Weekend last weekend about ag tech? It's just fascinating. So I think that perhaps that's something, if we get the opportunity, that's something we'll definitely do, is try and broaden out the sample activities to try and pick up. It's just, we'll be picking up what's happening now, but you know that within 2 years that will have changed. So it's just a matter of getting people into, giving them ideas, really. Any comments on that? We also made a mistake in one of the focus areas, and we didn't pick it up, but we've picked it up now. So we're hoping that we might get a chance very soon to just repair that error, so we don't confuse people.
We're also hoping we get a chance to take out some of the white space on the document that's up on the department site at the moment, because it's not very usable, that document.
Okay. So when we started out with digital literacy, and I think this has happened with the certificates in general education for adults too over the years, people have come from the mindset of thinking about reading and writing and how they can make that digital. So if you write a set of instructions and then you put them on computer, that's digital. But we're trying to get people to a different frame of mind, and what it's forced me to do is really to think about how is digital literacy impacting on how we now define reading, writing, numeracy. What are the things that are changing that? Are reading and writing as important as we thought they were 10 years ago, or is digital literacy availability actually changing some of this? You know, what about assisted technologies? What about what you do when you jump in a car and say closest McDonald's or something, and that lovely voice tells you how to get there and shows you, you don't even have to know left and right, you just look at it and, oh, I've got to go that way. So we really want some feedback about from people. Are we relying also more on people's listening skills? Yep. Yeah. Oh, Siri, yes, agree. So is it changing the way you think about what you teach in reading and writing? Do you think keyboard skills are important as handwriting? some students can hardly write now. That is true. I don't think 2 of my kids write at all. And they, I mean, they both can, but I don't think they do much, if at all. So, what about assisted technologies? Are you covering those in your teaching? Yeah, you've got spell check, yep. What was that about the, did you pick that up, Dave, about the older ESL are great with, just great with digital literacy for problem solving, are they? Oh, that's great. Use translator apps, yeah. So is it making you think about what you teach, how we define or prioritise skills in reading and writing? What do you think, Dave, about its impact on numeracy?
I mean, I certainly think that there is an impact, and I mean, I think in terms of numeracy that maybe things have become more digital over the last, well, it's probably this century really, but I think one of the critical things in numeracy is that it's the amount of data that we're now expected to digest. I mean, the pandemic's the best example of that, is that the headlines every day and the information that's presented is presented, you know, graphically and digitally using quite sophisticated technology. So, you know, so I think it's across the board that the impact is, and I think that the challenge is how do you take it on board across all the core skills, and I think that's, I mean, and if you think of the ACSF, we think it's not that old, but since 2012 things have changed significantly, I think. So, I mean, it would be fantastic if the government said, let's revise the whole ACSF, so the sorts of questions and discussions that we're having at this moment could be taken on board across all of the core skills.
Yeah.
I mean, I sort of feel that, you know, the underpinning sort of structure's okay. It's about, there could be some bits, like you're saying in the digital literacy, there could be some aspects that are missing. Yep. And I think that communication, I mean, in some ways, we probably weren't aware when we were doing the writing the new, you know, the 2012 version of the ACSF, but that third indicator in the end has ended up being pretty critical, I think, because it does sort of make it quite explicit that you do have to have both oral and not, you know, non-oral, if you like, which is now, you know, more complicated ways of talking and discussing and representing and numeracy skills, and I think that's true across all of them. So, but I think the assistive technologies, having just working with ACR at the moment on writing all the revised or new alt text for screen readers, for assistive technologies for items, and we've always argued in the past that if you put alt text in for some questions, then you give away the answer. But I've just argued with my colleagues to say that that's the reality of where we're living now. So if that's the technologies that people use in their real lives, then that should be an acceptable way of moving forward. And so therefore that's something that we need to take on board in the framework as well. So there are interesting things happening in the 21st century related to technology that are impacting on, you know, what we assess and how we assess. I mean, we're having arguments. ACR does the recruitment assessments for police recruits in a number of states around Australia and the AFP. But the reluctance of the police forces to allow us to assess writing not with a pen is really interesting. So some are still saying that the cops need to use their pen when they're out on the job. And so therefore, you know, they might then go back to the office to write up reports and things. So there is this interesting sort of dilemma about how important writing with a pen is versus writing digitally. Maybe they're now at least equally as important still for some vocations, but not for all. So, and somehow the framework has to accommodate that, I think. So.
And I said one of the comments there was that they get assessments done in text speak. That's interesting. I mean, what do you do about that? I suppose you try and teach appropriate and, well, you know, it's register, isn't it? Written register. Whereas I can't really use text speak. So my texts look pretty much like anything I would write. Also, there's a comment from SV. I just wanted to talk with SV. Can that person take the mic?
I haven't written anything.
SV, yeah, you said something about assisted technologies with dyslexic student.
Oh, that wasn't me. That must be someone else. But
was it? Sorry, I haven't got it on my screen anymore.
Oh,
can you see it there?
Yeah, I can't. It's gone now. So if whoever made the comment about working with dyslexic students.
That was me, Dave Colley from Hacken West Community Centre.
Yeah.
So I had a when we were delivering an upfront assessment the other week, one of the student participants came in to undertake that assessment, but their dyslexia was extremely bad that they needed support. So I supported that person through the online assessment, and we had a bit of a chat afterwards. So he actually wrote the sentence in handwriting, and then I typed that in for him, word by word, sentence by sentence, exactly as he typed it. But what he said to me is that he was aware that his spelling was not great, that his sentence structure wasn't too bad. He did go back, he had great editing skills. He went back and read through what he was saying, but he couldn't recognise that, and things were misspelt. So what he would do is actually do text to talk or talk to text. And so he had several programs on his phone, on his computer that he would utilise. And if he couldn't spell a word, then he would have different strategies that he used in order to access the correct spelling of that word as well. So, yeah, that voice to text was really critical for him in being able to undertake a lot of the things that he does in his everyday life, because, yeah, he's got that is quite disabling for a lot of people. So they have to develop those strategies in order to be able to be successful. So
does that make assessment challenging?
For that particular one, yeah, it was I just had to provide the, appropriate support for him. So it wasn't too bad. He was very anxious about it, of course, but overall he managed quite well. So he was able to read and answer questions without any issue at ACS level 3. But with the writing, it was PL pretty much with his writing, because he couldn't spell.
It's tricky though, because I guess in the workplace there's less concern about how you get there and whether you're using assisted technologies or not. So we don't want our classrooms to not reflect the real world, so that there's a lot we've got to think through.
Yeah, exactly. So he had a lot of strategies, and I think that's what we're looking for. And I saw a comment earlier just in terms of putting a lot of this under strategies for learning, and digital literacy is one of those things, but a lot of people use digital literacy as a strategy to support their learning. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind particularly with our ESLs. They use that a lot. And they use a lot of voice to text, I think, too, with the digital literacy, with the English as second language learners, in my experience. So
totally agree with you. And dragon speaking is really good for people with dyslexia, and also depends on the level of dyslexia that they have. Some are quite severe, and the strategies are key to helping them.
Okay. Any other comments or questions that people want to make? and vision problems here. Okay, so they're questions we, I guess as a, I guess as a sector, we've got to have the courage to at least look at these questions. When I've raised them in some forums, people are just so resistant to really thinking through any of this. And well, we've got to have the courage to do it. And it might change how we've taught some of the other skills. But if that's the best thing to do, then I think we've got to think about it and do it.
One of the other things we use a lot as well is looking at using apps to communicate with each other in groups. So we use WhatsApp as well. So with the class, we just have a class WhatsApp group and or Facebook group, and we use that around digital literacy, about communication, who's going to be away, you know, those things, questions that they might need to consider when they're out and about. And that's a nice way as well to encourage not just communication but connection and social connection within that, because underpinning a lot of the skills that we're talking about is social connection and how we work together as a team or as a community. And so I think a lot of what you ladies are talking about today, assisted technologies, voice to text, that's all building people's capacity to participate in their everyday life. And so I think that, and to have a life that is, you know, that aligns and enables them to participate the same as everybody else, so they feel like they're part of a society and part of a community without being, you know, excluded as they often are.
Yeah, and that, look, I know they love being able to use their phones because that's what people are doing. So that's I'm thinking of lower level students and Indigenous learners. But the other thing we haven't really touched on, I suppose, is that this is just another big ask of our LLN teachers, isn't it? To now get our heads around a whole new core skill. So do we, you know, are we all going to get our heads around it, or is it something that we're going to sort of pass it over to specialist teachers like where, you know, the field's inclined to do with higher level numeracy, or what? Any comments on that? Do people feel confident, or do you feel like you really need support?
I teach digital literacy probably 2 full days a week, and it's just part of that everyday culture of LLN. I think we need to actually include it in language literacy, numeracy, and the D on the end, because it's just part of communication these days.
Yeah,
we have to. Foundation skills.
I'm just saying, how do we as teachers learn all these new skills if we haven't got them?
Okay, yeah.
But you know, I agree with you, the discussion, and Jenny and I have working on another project, and we had a terrible time trying to get the D in. Yes, it almost led to tears, actually. Yeah, so we're getting comments through. Yeah, okay. No, they're not all comfortable. Okay, we should push on and close this off. The Digital Literacy Skills Framework is a dynamic document, particularly at the moment. And there's always going to be a risk to writing something like this, because your sample activities and maybe your skills are going to need to change. I don't know how we're going to handle that, but this will be useful in the short term, we hope. It is building on existing national and international frameworks. We are in the process of incorporating feedback, as you can see, so we're really grateful for anything you've offered today. And you can write to either, or you can just, I don't know, write it to Dave, I guess, at ACER or Billy, and they'll get it to us. Yeah, and we will need to revisit the document. We don't know when it's going to be incorporated. We don't know when it'll finish being a draft document. There's policy decisions being made at DESI over the next few months, so I'm not confident it's going to happen quickly. I don't know if anyone else has got any update on that. Do you know any more, Dave?
No, I don't get consulted.
Oh, don't take it personally. So, yes, please let us know any feedback, and please, you know, has this been useful? Is the framework useful? Do you think you'll use it? We really hope so. Anything you want to say, Jenny?
I've just seen a couple of messages about the feedback. I guess
Yeah.
what we do know from attending another webinar earlier this week with the department was that they have committed to updating the ACSF and incorporating digital literacy, and we think that we'll be able to correct some of the things that are wrong at the moment with the digital literacy skills framework. But we don't actually have end dates on those, do we?
No. So thanks everyone, and you know, your teaching is very, very important. It's a really critical role you're playing. So wherever we can support you, we hope we will, and please enjoy it and just realise what an important role you're playing. Thank you.
So Philippa, we do have time because we actually did allow longer for this. If you want to open up to still some more questions and things.
Yeah, sure. I'll open up to comments. Yes, please.
I think what we need to do is get a transcript of all the comments over the last 10 minutes and
yeah,
and circulate them, but we'll get the,
yeah.
the chat out.
I'm looking into that at the moment.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain you can get access to the chat.
Yeah. Yes, if anyone has any questions, raise your hand and we'll we'll get either Philippa or Jenny to answer them, or Dave.
It's been interesting. Philippa and Jenny earlier were talking about the fact that they worked with some other staff at ACR to develop some of the digital literacy items, and some of those are now being used out in the field. So there are times when I get to the psychometricians who do all of our psychometric analysis of our questions, come back and say, oh, have a look at this, you know. Nobody's been able to answer that question at all in the sample that we were using. And of course, then you get into a panic to say, oh, we stuffed up the question, there's something wrong, it's not possible to answer it. But each time, I think that's happened 2 or 3 times over the last few months since these have been trialled and being used. But thank goodness, what happened was that those were actually the items that the team wrote that they thought would be up at ACSF level 4, even though it's not written in the framework officially, but it was about what would be above level 3 that's described there. And so far, all of the questions that have been the most challenging were the ones that actually were up at written up at ACSF level 4. So there is this, you know, this at least getting some feedback now about how all of the questions that were written, or some of the questions written, have been performing is quite interesting. So one of the nice things about working at ACR is that you don't just get an assessment of an item's or a question's difficulty from professional judgment and us all arguing about is it a 2 or is it a 3. We actually get the psychometric data to say, yeah, this question was the most difficult of all of these, and then we can have a look at why it might be the most difficult and all that sort of stuff. So it will be interesting as we get more data in about the questions that have been drafted, about what ones are more difficult than others. And so some of the things you were arguing about, is this a level 1 or a level 3? We actually get some empirical evidence to find out, in fact, you know, people out in the real world, how did they find those questions? So, and hopefully if we can get some of that information in before Jenny and Philippa get permission to rewrite it, then that will help illustrate or tidy up some of the wording and so on. So
it'd be good to get feedback on that specific question that we got the variety on today, if there is any. Yeah.
Yep, I'd have to have a look at whether it's one that's been used or not.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure, that'd be great.
It's Gail here. I'm just looking through the document and I noticed that some of the terminology is underlined. Like I'm looking at 2.13, you've got digital systems or software packages. So if this was online, does that give you a definition? Is that why it's underlined?
Well,
yes, it's underlined. So we've included a glossary at the back of the document. So the underlined terms you'll find in the glossary at the back. But yes, that was some feedback that we had, that the underlined words could be hyperlinked as well. So they're not at the moment, but it'd be a good idea to do that. So yes. Yeah.
Thank you. I hadn't noticed the glossary in the back.
No, that's okay.
So is that a digital literacy skill or a reading skill?
Maybe it was our lack. We should have put it in the introduction, actually. Because a few people have said that.
We did mention, it is mentioned in the introduction.
Yeah, but not in our introduction. Not for the PowerPoint.
Oh, right. I see what you mean.
It's, yeah, that's one of the changes we want made with the one that's up on the DESI website too, because they've taken the underlining out and we're not sure.
They put this bold through it that doesn't make any sense. So, It's interesting for me, Dave, to hear you talk about the feedback on those tasks, particularly the ones at the higher level. And through that experience of working with that team of people and thinking about what content might be included at higher levels, I think the content does start to focus more on the competency of using particular software and particular tools. So I sort of envisage that if we did have the opportunity to write those higher levels, that you sort of get a transition from digital literacy skills at the lower levels, but as you go up the levels, the content that gets focused on is more about the competency of being able to use particular software. So, for example, I remember one of those assessment tasks at what we tagged at level 4 was about being able to customize content pages for a document in Word with, you know, very specific details. So not just a contents page that automatically creates itself, but one that you customize. So just sort of, it was a very interesting activity for me to be involved with that team and sort of start to think about what might be incorporated at higher levels. So just a comment.
That also reminds me, Jenny, that one of my questions, or one of the points I want to draw our attention to as teachers, is that there's so much information available now, so that skill of critical literacy, critical reading, it is just so important, and it's something I think teachers shy away from. I've noticed over the years teachers are much more comfortable with the focus areas in 04 than the focus areas in 03, and similarly for writing. They're more comfortable with 06 than 05. But with digital literacy, those other skills are just critical literacy skills. Do people feel that, and do they attempt to concentrate on it in the teaching? Any comments?
while people are thinking or writing, I mean, it seems to me that whole critical aspect's true across all of the core skills now. I mean, in numeracy, it's exactly the same. I mean, I think because we keep being bombarded with more and more information, it's which of that information, you know, is trustworthy, is relevant, you know, how do you use the information you're provided with? And so that critical, I mean, in some of the other international work that I do and writing of frameworks, I mean, the thing that's coming out, it's the same in the reading framework for the international assessment, is the thing that's changed from the framework in 2011 when we wrote the last one to the one that's just been published this year for the next iteration of this assessment, is both independently, the two expert groups in reading and in numeracy, the things that changed explicitly in the framework were the critical aspects. And so that what was seen by these experts from around the world was that what's changed in the last 10 years is that need to be able to be critical reflectors on what it is you're reading or what you're handling in numeracy and mathematics. And digital literacy is the same, and the digital environment is how we often get all of that information these days. So I mean, the other thing that's happened is that, you know, the frameworks are also much more explicitly addressing the digital world, but in terms of the conceptual framework against which you're trying to assess, the thing that changed significantly, and with similar wording, even though these were two expert groups, I mean, we all sort of know each other, but the thing that changed in both quite independently but with very similar terminology was this building into the descriptions and the definitions the critical literacy / numeracy aspect.
Well,
Anybody got any other burning questions or comments, suggestions? I mean, that when you get access to the whole recording, so you get all of the audio, and Billy and I will see if we can make sure we can also get a copy of the chat. I have had access to the chats before, so we must be able to, and we'll make sure that you've got access to that, so you can also see what everybody else said. Plus, for Jenny and Philippa's sake, there's probably a lot of stuff in there that you can take on board, so we'll make sure that you get that back to you. And you'll then see everybody's email addresses within the PowerPoint, so you can.
our addresses.
It's possibly that you haven't got mine, but you will have got the invite from Billy, so please send any other comments through to Billy and we can feed them on to Jenny and Philippa.
Okay. Thanks, Billy.
Anybody else got any other comments or suggestions? How we move forward, apart from telling the federal government to fund adult literacy and numeracy and professional development programs so we can all actually be paid to be trained in all these things, but you know, nobody ever listens, you know. Yeah. So thank you everybody for listening, but especially thank you to Philippa and Jenny for presenting about this new framework. I think it's really exciting that it's available, because I think the sorts of discussions we've been having for the last 20 or 30 minutes, because of the world we're now working in and living in, and our students are working in and living in, and I think it's a very different, quite challenging world. I mean, there's a few comments I've noticed in the chat about online learning. So the whole, I always say, people just say, oh yeah, we'll all do it via online learning. Well, of course, the same old students are the ones that miss out. If you don't have good literacy skills, then you're more disadvantaged. And I think it's the same in schools. So across the board, I think there are more challenges as we move forward. And I think digital literacy and all foundation skills are really critical. I hope you've got something out of this. I hope it's got you thinking. It's obviously got Philippa and Jenny and myself thinking. So it's really good. And for those who are, I don't know how many of you are also logging in tomorrow to hear me carry on about numeracy, but I hope some of you are, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. And for those who are, for those who want to come and listen to me for tomorrow, you can still register.
Yep.
So please do that. And we'll make sure that we get all this information back out to you as soon as we can, but certainly in the next day or two. Anything from you, Billy?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to mirror what you said. So the recording will go out in the next couple of days with your certificates. If you have any questions that you want me to forward on to either Dave, Philip, or Jenny, please send them through, and I can do that for you. Yeah, so thank you all.
I think they want to know what time you're on
Yeah,
tomorrow.
same
Dave.
time, midday.
Midday.
Midday tomorrow for 90 minutes. So, yep, that'll be on the.
If anyone's interested to join, shoot me an email and I'll send you through the link. Where you can, yeah, where you can register.
All right, thank you very much, folks, and good luck with all your work. It's really important work. So, maybe Philip and Jenny, do you want to hang on for a bit of a debrief along with Billy and Luke? All right, bye everybody. Thank you for joining.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye, folks. Interesting watching people disappear into the ether.
Yes. Oh, Joanne, nice gift there. Thanks.
Yes.
What's she say?
Oh, in the chat, it's just a little